Hey everyone, that was a weird little audio extravaganza we had going in on the headphones here. Hello, welcome to the worst produced show on the internet. I'm your host, Pete Bickford. You're at the ComicBase Livestream, where for the next hour or so we'll be talking about all manner of comic booky type things. In particular, I had some thoughts on why comic pricing can often be wildly out of whack, why comic stores often suck, and a old psychological slash game theory game called The Prisoner's Dilemma, which hopefully you'll find it interesting, and we'll talk a bit about that. But before we get into that, let's say hello to some folks who are here, and thank you everyone for showing up. By the way, also thank you everyone who was part of our ComicBase Live After Dark live stream the other night. That was a lot of fun. I gotta say, I was nervous as hell about doing that thing because basically what I wanted to try was a largely unfiltered discussion over on Rumble about whatever was on your mind, to put as many of you onto the show as I could fit. And you guys were absolute stars. Thank you to everyone who participated. I look forward to doing another one in the future. Probably have to keep it to about a monthly kind of deal because we went almost 3 hours on that one. It was great, but at the end of a day where I'd also been doing the ComicBase live stream, and I was absolutely wiped out at the end of that one. But let's try to do one in the future. And thank you again. All right, but anyway, before we move on, I want to say hello to Thomas B. Welcome. Mike Beam is joining us from Vancouver. Oro Viejo, who also was on the After Dark stream. Great to see you. That was terrific. I now understand the duck icon, so that was great to see. And let's see here, Larry's Library, welcome. Ed Billiot, Greg Hecht, of course, our moderator, Jet City Comics, and let's see, Fairfax, Virginia, in the house. Jerry Fox, joining from Eastern Tennessee. Guessing Knoxville area? Don't know. But welcome to the stream. Good to see you, man. All right, well, let's get to it. Not a lot of comic-based news in particular that I want to share this week. We have the odd little bills right now, but most of them, to be perfectly honest, what's changed in the last week is things that are changing behind the scenes as we prep for our next major release. It's not anything that's going to be particularly visible to the customer end of things, but there are some interesting things I hope to be sharing in the future, though. Let me see what else. I scroll up my notes here. Was there anything else I wanted to get to here? Yes, there were a few items of news. Yes, kind of huge now that I'm actually looking at them. First of all, we hit, thank you everyone, as of last week, we hit 950,000 covers in the database. The actual number is now over 952,000 covers, which is psychotic to me. Thank you everyone who made that happen. And we are updating, everything is live on, if you're downloading covers, if you would have gotten those as part of the weekly update. If you're downloading the Quick Start archives, we're going to have those updated by Friday. We're pushing out an update this week, and we'll be updating the full download versions of the one file where you can download everything all at once. We'll be downloading that. That'll be updated by the end of the week. And kind of interesting, we're putting a process in place where we think we can keep that updated every Friday. So now, if you're ever coming in on a new computer and you just want to install the program fresh, usually there was a bit of a gap between the last major version of ComicBase where we've been able to update all the covers and what you'd be installing, and maybe you'd be missing a few issues, here and then, and had to download them manually. We actually think we've pulled off some stuff on the back end so that we can make it so whenever you're installing ComicBase on a new machine, you're always caught up with our latest update. And so that's kind of cool. I'm really looking forward to that. And Andre is joining us here. Hello, welcome to see you. All right, so let me see what else we have going on here. Oh, yeah, huge. Our ComicBase spring sale is on. This is something I'm not sure if we're going to do it every year, but for we did it last year and it worked out amazingly well, and we're going to do it again. We just kicked it off. It's not even official till I think about another half hour from now. But if you need to upgrade your ComicBase or you're buying it new, man, did you pick the right time, because this is, we're saving you, I think it's about 33% off the upgrades for the ComicBase Archive Edition series. Some real deals as far as moving up to our Archive Edition. I'm giving away the whole game on this one, but if you're even thinking, it's like, well, I don't know, I could get the Pro, but for a little more, I could get the Archive. Is it really worth it? 950,000 covers, guys. Absolutely go for the Archive. It's not even close. By the way, fun fact, we ran the numbers, I think 2 weeks ago, to say if you took all the comic books with March cover dates, what percentage of them were variants of one sort or another, and it was 81.2%, I believe. It might have been 81.7%, but 81% of the comics that shipped had March cover dates were a variant of one sort or another. We live in crazy times, guys. So yes, having that photo reference of the archive edition there is absolutely huge. So if you're thinking about it, head on over to comicbase.com. Just go to your registrations and click the upgrade renew button and save yourself some money. So yeah, that's a good thing. You should do it. All right. Let me see here. Is there anything else we need to do, or can we? Oh my God! Oh man, that's terrible news. Or just says, sadly, we just lost Al Jaffe from Mad Magazine, 102 years old. Dang, man, that is cool. I'm gonna have to pull some art and do some kind of a memorial for that. Yeah, that Mad Magazine was just a huge part of, I think, a lot of our, comic reading lives, and man, he was one of the greats. All right, he said, and Oro once said, reminder, inventor of the fold-ins, of course, which is everyone's favorite part of that magazine that I know of. I think the main reason you would, so many Mad magazines cannot be found in your mid position is because, condition anymore is because they were all, glumbled over to, fold, spindle, and mutilate, but in order to, get the fold in on the back covers, those were absolutely huge. I remember when Mad went digital, they had, whenever I was trying to figure out what do CDs in this weird new multimedia world, what do they hold for the comic books? And one of the first ideas was to digitize all of Mad magazine, and they had to build in a special thing just so you could show the fold in action as it happens. So that was actually the one and only feature of the entire program, which otherwise was just a picture viewer. But that was really kind of neat. All right. Anyway, well, Al, Godspeed, man. All right. Well, let's move on to some other things here. All right. So if you guys have not heard of it before, there is again, you might call it a psychological game or psychological experiment. You might want to call it an experiment in game theory, but it's one of the most famous ones of all time. It's called the prisoner's dilemma. The scenario goes something like this. All right, there's been a horrible crime committed. It's somebody got whacked, and and they grab a couple of prisoners. They're sure it's one of the two of them. They go to the first guy, Jimmy No Nose, and they say, Jimmy, we know it was either you or Joey, Joey No Neck over there. We know one of you did it, so we're gonna give you a deal because we're such sweethearts here. You give up you give up that it was really Joey. We'll cut you a sweetheart deal. Instead of serving 20 to life, we'll give you only 3 years in the slammer. That's a slap on the wrist for a guy like you. But if you wait and if Joey gives you up first, then it's going to be 20 years for you, and he gets off with 3 years. Now, the thing you, of course, leave off is if nobody gives the other guy up, you both walk. Now, so you, of course, give the same deal to Joey No Neck as you would give to Jimmy No Nose. You don't need to tell him that, but that's the way the game is played. And it basically goes like this. First guy who gives up the other guy, he walks away with 3 years. Yeah, sometimes it goes 3 or 5 or 7, it doesn't matter, but he gets away with a light punishment. If you don't give him up and he gives you up, you get the heavy punishment, he gets the light punishment. But if you both manage to hold your tongues, despite all the incentives, you both walk. So what's a guy to do? Well, it turns out this is one of the most thoroughly investigated psychological phenomena or game theory things that's ever been done. And the answer, regardless of anything else, and this is barring any other considerations of the fact that Joey No Neck might have some friends on the outside who would whack you, or the capo would be mad at you if you gave him up, or whatever the thing is. Barring all those other considerations, the winning strategy, as it turns out, is always screw the other guy. You screw the other guy, you screw him first before he can do you. But that's the way to win Prisoner's Dilemma, or at least to lose it the least amount, because all your other options are worse. The chance that he gives you up are huge, and it's the best way to go. All other things being considered. So that is a sad commentary on life. It's kind of it's a weird one, and it's going to come into play here in just a sec. But before we get into it, I want to point out a variation on the game, which is called iterative Prisoner's Dilemma. And that one goes like this. It's just same scenario, Somebody got whacked, you give him up first, you get the light punishment. He gives you up first. He gets the light punishment, you get the heavy punishment. And you both, nobody gives him up. You both walk. All right, but iterative prisoner's dilemma says there's more than one round, which is to say, it's not a one and done. And so, you're going to have a circle around this guy. Apparently you're going to be in and out of jail a lot, whatever the thing is. But you have a chance to screw him the one time. He has a chance to screw you the next time, whatever the thing is. But the fact that you're going to be playing against each other more than once has to inform your decision making. At which point, the winning strategy shifts markedly. Because it turns out, if you're gonna play the game more than once, if the guy isn't going to be dead by the end of the whole thing, or if you're never if you're ever going to see him again, or you're ever going to be in this situation where you have to play with each other more than once, then it turns out the winning strategy is the strategy called tit for tat, which is to say, whatever he did to you, you do to him. So if he kept his mouth straight in the last, if he shut his mouth in the last game, then you shut your mouth in the next game. Eventually, because you eventually have the information about what the other guy did, and how the other guy is willing to treat you, you'll typically arrive at one of two equilibriums. Either you guys are constantly screwing each other, or you're constantly sticking up for each other, and you're both walking. But the more you play the game, the more it pays to do to the other guy what he did to you last time. Now, this has lessons for any number of things, politics being a very, frequent one, which is to say, you think the other guys are doing dirty, well, the answer is, you're going to have more than one election. You're playing for keeps. If this is the last election, and after that, you slip into a new system of government or anarchy or whatever the thing is. If it's the last election, well, then go balls to the wall and just go nuts. But if it's not the last election, if you're going to have another one after this one, then basically whatever the other guys were doing, you should do the same to them next time out. If they're being straightforward and upright and honorable, well, then you got to be straightforward and upright and honorable too. If they're being down dirty, lying dogs who are willing to stop at nothing to get their way, you know what? You gotta do the same to them, because otherwise you just you will essentially teach them that you will take it, and you'll teach them that they can get away with it, with murder. And if by teaching them, you also can give back to them. You actually provide an incentive structure for them to back the hell off. Anyway, I was thinking about all this stuff when I was looking at a video one day. I think it was sometime this weekend. I was just, I keep a list of YouTube videos in my feed. They're kind of like my background TV. I just have a big playlist plays on the office TV off to my left there, and it's like the background music of my day is I'm waiting on some long processor compiling whatever the thing is, right? You can kind of glance over whatever the thing was that was playing. And one of the things that came up let me show you just a little bit of it here. Let me switch the cameras. Let's see here. All right. So the title of this one was "Kicked Out of 2 Comic Shops in 1 Hour." And I'm thinking, geez, what do you got to do to get kicked out of 2 comic shops in an hour? I don't think I've been kicked out of a comic shop in 40 years. But he managed to do it in 1 hour. And so, and I'm going to play it here without the sound on. But this guy had decided he wanted to shop around with, CGC'd a bunch of, I'm sorry, with the exception of that one Green Lantern number 40 over there, a bunch of really common comic books. These are nothing that would get anyone excited, except they're CGC'd. Yeah, they're decent, but on the other hand, they're common as dirt. And he had in mind that he was going to, take these into his little book bag and strap on a camera and then walk around to a bunch of different comic stores and see what happens, see if he can sell them. And he walks in different places. Now, one thing to note here, and you can see this, is that, whoops. Oh, good grief. Sorry. Is that the guy's walking around with a chest rig. You can see it from the aperture, right here. You see the huge amount of radial distortion on the whole thing. So he's walking around with a chest rig cameras. He's walking all these comic shops, and as it turns out, he does not get the best reactions you might ever think. I think he's fairly fair as he goes about these things, about saying, well, okay, this is what the shop was doing well, this is what the shop was doing badly, but uh, as he's walking through these different places, and yeah, okay, I don't really find anything good. Maybe I bought some cards from this guy, and he's always shocked that they were not wowed by his huge selection of comic books that anyone could get, that they weren't willing to pay several $100 for them. Um, and I'm kind of looking over here, going, God, these shops are not great. This one actually had comic books. The guy treated him quite, they did not get along particularly well. These guys actually had some comic books, but bad things happened. And anyway, and I'll switch back to the camera over here. As it turns out, uh, there were other people around at the time, and he tried to make deals in the guy's comic stores with either first, I believe he tried to sell his books because the guy wasn't particularly interested. He tried to sell his books to a guy in the store, just take this business right to another customer in the store. And another one, there was a lady who was trying to sell. I was like, oh, I got a bunch of old comic books. And the guys were like, yeah, I don't know, we're kind of full up here. We don't really need more comic books. And he followed her out to the parking lot and said, "Hey, can I maybe do a deal with you?" And then the person who was really uninterested in the lady's comic books then apparently jumped out from behind the counter and said, "You can't do that. This is my store." And so get out my premises. And it's a good way to get really not get along with the comic store owners. Try to do business outside the channels. By the way, this is also a good way to get kicked off of auction sites. It's a good way to get kicked out of things. Is like, if someone's going to take the time to make a business that's for the purposes of buying and selling, they also, in my experience, tend to be fairly unfriendly about people trying to cut around the system to make a deal, without that person getting a cut. But in any case, he managed to get kicked out of 2 comic stores in a day, and I'm kinda watching it, and I'll be honest, I'm kinda looking over what the stores and the way he was treated, and the scheme he was trying to pull and everything, and I'm just getting depressed. Uh, it's, my impression through most of it is there was only maybe 1, maybe 2 of the stores he visited that I would ever darken their doorstep on purpose more than once. I feel like we all know these comic stores. They're the ones where, they either have no stock, it's all over the place, it's, you could smell the dust, it's piled up everywhere. There was one store, it looked like someone's, wading through their garage. It was terrible. But then whenever you ask them, well, how much is this dust covered object over here? And then they quote you a price that's like, you got to be kidding me. It's like, oh, $300 for the dust covered, battered up, 1988 action figure of, Jar Jar Binks, whatever the thing is. But, he was like, okay, thank you, bye. And then you just, vowed yourself, never go back there. Um, and I was just thinking like, man, okay, so you got people like that, and you also have people who, just nasty. I mean, they will, they'll treat people who aren't particularly knowledgeable about comic books with contempt. They will lie to them to their face about how rare something is. About, oh no, no, this here is the most rare thing ever. As they point to a copy of Cable #1. I heard a story once about someone who's like, someone had gone up there with a big box full of Golden Age comic books, and the guy to this face is, well, I don't know, I can't give you very much for them here because these ones are all they're all old, and kids, they like the new stuff, so I don't know, man. I could maybe do 50 cents a comic book here for you. At which point, it's just highway robbery at that point. It's you don't I mean, I don't have anything good to say at that point. It's You're just taking advantage of a little old lady or a little old guy selling his comic books, and you're going to, the second he leaves the store, you're going to get those suckers graded, and they're going to be up there with 3, 4, 5 digits on their price tags as soon as he's gone. And in the meantime, you were giving him 50 cents a comic book. So I mean, absolute psychotic stuff. And I was talking to my wife about it, and I was thinking, I don't know, man. Is it me? Is it a class thing? I mean, is it just kind of like, do I feel like I'm above this? I'm just, I just, because I mean, I've been that guy in a way. I mean, I've been the 13-year-old guy who, like, knew, I had the Mulver Street price guide memorized. Would go and sell comic books that I bought for 30, 40 cents, and I marked them all the way up to a buck sometimes, putting them in a bag. Yeah, I don't think we even use boards very much, but and you think, "Ha, I made my money back and doubled it, and I read the comic book." So, I mean, I'm just winning, winning, winning here. And you could know when something had gotten hot or some character had been used in a new series, and suddenly their first appearance was worth a lot of money. And if you could find the guy who didn't know about that yet and go through his back stock, it's like, aha, first appearance of Nick Fury is in Strange Tales number 135, and he still has it marked for $3, and it's going for at least 15 now. Um, I mean, we've been that guy, and you'd like to be rewarded for your knowledge when you do learn something special. At the same time, I don't know. There's a time where you get just sort of like you feel like it brings out the bad part of you, and I remember it kind of vividly for me. It was there was a comic book that I wanted worse than anything. I was a big, big Star Wars fan back in the day. I was just a little kid, but there was, I think, Marvel's Star Wars number 5, which was the only one I needed to do to have read the story. I think I read Star Wars, over there in comic and in novel form probably about 3 or 4 times before I actually got a chance to see the movie. That's, again, I was very young. Yeah, I didn't have my own transportation then, but I was really into it. And it turns out my neighbor had issue number 5 of that one. It was like one of those things you got down at the local 7-Eleven or Tom Thumb, and it was in one of those blister packs, 3 comic books for 50 cents or whatever the thing was. And I was like, "Oh, man, I'll trade you," at that point, I had to trade it or anything to get that copy of Star Wars number 5, but she's like, "Nah, I just kinda want it," and the more she waffled, the more I'm like, "Yeah," like, you're biting your, hand, I mean, just you get to the point where you're getting a little creepy. So, eventually, I just had to, like, take myself and slap myself silly saying, "Just cut it out, Pete. I mean, you're not being a normal person with this one, and you're freaking out the neighbor, so don't do it." And I think, the most embarrassed I've ever been about wanting a comic book so much that I was willing to, like, color over my own morals in order to, like, get it, I mean, I wasn't willing to outright lie from her, but man, I was telling myself stories about, "Well, it wouldn't be wrong if you told her blah," I again, you do that internal monologue about how far you'd be willing to go to get, something you want very badly, and I was just like, I'm glad I didn't go any further than I did because I was creeping myself out, like I say. But, but yeah, I mean, when I see this kind of, behavior in comic shops, I mean, it does creep me out as an older guy. And part of it is, I don't know. I feel like there's both a moral case to be said for how far you should go and no further, and honestly, I think there's also a business case. And I guess I want to talk to the business case more than the moral case right now because I'm actually going to say I'm on one level or another. I'm okay with anyone doing any kind of business they want as long as they don't out and out, distort it. And also, I think that certain kinds of business practices have their own very foreseeable repercussions. And that's, I think, where we get to model the prisoner's dilemma, not so much as as a strategy for morals, but as a strategy for are you even going to get the money you want at the end of the day if you take certain strategies as a retailer or as for pricing comic books? And so and I think that's, the iterative prisoner's dilemma in particular is really interesting about this whole thing. Because I think what it comes down to is too many comic stores are acting as if they're never going to see this guy again, ever. And as a result, the winning strategy they're following is screw him first. And I think that's bad. And so I want to talk about that. But first of all, and I'll warn you, I have digression number 1 and digression number 2 actually in my show notes. I think they're interesting stories, so bear with me for a bit. But digression number 1, it's just a small personal story. For anyone who's ever moved to the South, I think you'll appreciate this one. So grew up in the Midwest. I spent most of my life out in California. I ran a company out in San Jose for 20 some years, and eventually I figured out that California is not the greatest place to run a small business. But the problem, of course, is California itself is a lovely, lovely state, and you need to have a place to move to that is better, on some, metric you care about that's, from where you're at. So that's why moving out of California, even though I thought, well, this isn't the most healthy place to do business, I knew that for 10 years before it was time to move. And so not until I moved to Nashville did I find a place that was worth moving to. Yeah, but although every time I would go on a family vacation, I was always kind of checking out the real estate listings and, thinking, well, if we moved here, what would that be like? But one of the things I learned when I first moved to the Nashville area is I'm really in a little town called Franklin, just south of Nashville by about 15 minutes. But one of the things that I thought was interesting about the people in the South, and I think everyone who's been through the South will vouch for this, are ridiculously friendly. They will, Californians. I had a person I used to tutor in computer science once. He was trying to tell me because I was a Midwestern kid at that point. It's like, well, Californians are different because in the Midwest, I was going to school in Madison, Wisconsin. In the Midwest, if you see someone crying in their room, you'll come in, you're like, you'll say, "Oh man, what's wrong? Can I help you out?" It's like, and you want to get to the bottom of it. In California, they'll just kind of figure you need your space and they'll leave you alone. And that is true. I found that to be one of the more telling things about the difference between like California and the rest of the world is that yeah, they'll kind of just leave you be. I mean, it's you're working it out. You'll be fine. The South is the absolute opposite. They wanna know everything about your life history for every single person they meet, whereas California is just perfectly happiest way to say, "Hey, sup?" And that's all I need to know about you unless there's something where we have a connection and need to do business or whatever else. Just a friendly, "Hey, sup?" That's considered deep conversation, on a normal basis in California. Sometimes you maybe get eye contact, sometimes you get a wave, but man, anything more than that is I don't know. You're kind of stalking me, man. What's your deal? On the South, on the other hand, you can meet a random person in line at Chick-fil-A, and they'll be like, "Oh, yeah, so how long you been out here? Oh, that's amazing. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah." By the time you are done ordering your food, they will know, whether or not you got your mom a present for Christmas, whether or not, whether your family lives close by, whatever the whole thing is. It's ridiculous. But I thought, well, what is the deal with that? And one thing I learned pretty, early on is I said, okay, yeah, they're really, really friendly. I mean, they're like puppy dogs wagging their tail out here for the most part. But at the same time, they're doing the equivalent of IFF, which if you guys follow military acronyms is identify friend or foe. It's the transponder signal that your aircraft or your ships will have on them, which says, "Hey, I'm on side A, and if you're on the other side, you don't come near, I'm a friendly flying over." And that's what Southerners are doing, with the elaborate friendliness they get when they first meet you is they want to be your friend. They really do. They want to find out all about you, everything, but they want to figure out whether you're a problem. So it's like it's not entirely naive. I mean, they're not just being they're not just being ridiculously friendly for no reason. They're being ridiculously friendly because they would like to make friends with you. But if you're not going to be a friend, they want to know now, so so that they can protect themselves against getting burned by you or whatever the thing is. So that is something that happens a lot with the South. And the one thing I told myself after a couple weeks being out here is like, man, everyone I meet out here I better pretend I'm gonna meet them again because you also would just it's amazing how moving from a town with a little over 1,000,000 people in San Jose to a town that's, a bit smaller. I mean, it's, just shave a digit off that. It's not even quite that much of a difference, but just a slightly smaller town is you realize everyone's moving in a circle and everyone's got this kind of extended early warning radar out and exchanging information where it's like, "You know what? Whoever I meet, I better treat them like I'm gonna meet them again." And under no circumstances do you do this kind of one and done kind of relationship with people. Because if it's the person that you were rude to in the line at Chick-fil-A, next thing you know, they could be like the captain of the local fire department or whatever the deal is, or they know that person and and it will go badly for you. So, it was really very much like yeah, treat everyone like you'll be seeing them again and act accordingly. All right. So digression number two, and this one is more directly having to do with comic shops, is back in the day, and I might have told this one before in the live stream, but if not, it's a story worth telling. Capital City distribution and Diamond distribution used to be very much co-equal. I mean, they were neck and neck in terms of their market penetration and their power in the industry. This was before the great distributor wars, and back then they made a lot of efforts to woo people to their side by offering them extra services and bring them out to retailer conferences. And when we were first doing Comic Base, I wanted to know as much about comic retailing as I possibly could because we were considering doing a comic retailing product at the time. I thought, is there a pro version of this comic-based consumer software that we're thinking of launching? And I wanted to know, well, what's the life of comic retailers? Talk to as many people as possible, get to know what their scene was like outside of just my local comic book stores. And what I found out made me run incredibly scared from from that. But that's neither here nor there. Sorry, it wants to switch my audio device, and I want to say no, do not switch my audio device because bad things would happen if I do that. Okay, going back to this. But one of the things that they did is they brought in people like, I know there was Clive Barker, I saw Harlan Ellison, and Frank Miller. Were all speakers at either the Capitol or the Diamond distribution conferences, talking to retailers and talking about comics retailing. I believe also, I want to say Neil Gaiman. I think I also heard his Tulips speech the first time over there, which I think later got turned into a short little tract in a pamphlet, which is given out. I think we talked about this on one of the Christmas specials, but generally the idea of his idea with is going back to the tulip mania of the I think around 1600 in Amsterdam, was basically saying, guys, yes, things get hot from time to time, but grow the business and don't be selling speculative investments that are going to ruin people if you go nuts on them. Sell comics, don't sell tulips. But anyway, Frank Miller came up and gave a speech, and he was obviously, he's kind of a hero. I mean, he's one of the greats of independent comics. Even if you just know him from his mainstream stuff on Batman and Daredevil, what a career. And he told a great story, but I remember one image about it is he said, look, comic retailers, when you see a customer for the first time walk in your store, even if you hate people, think of this as like $1,000 bill just blew in through the door. And it's your job as a retailer to chase over that $100 bill and make sure it doesn't leave the store. Be nice to it, treat it well, make it want to stick around. Because if you don't, if you're too obsessed with your gaming area in the back, if you don't look up and greet the person as they come in, if you just ignore them, if they're not the kind of person who looks like your typical heavy hitter in the comic store, it looks like they don't fit in with your local gang, that $1,000 bill will just walk out again. And so why do you say $1,000 bill? Because at the time, that was about what a longtime comic customer was worth to a comic retailer who had managed to cultivate the business. Because if you get that comic customer and you convince them that yours is a great comic store and you should want to come back next week, then they're going to come back every Wednesday until they leave the field, or until you do something that really pisses them off. And I just thought that was the greatest image, and it was really the way you want to think when you're thinking about long-term business of any kind. I didn't know at the time. At the time there was no internet, and we hadn't had the idea of downloadable updates or things like that. But we knew just at the time we were at one point we were pursuing a deal with the Overstreet Price Guide, but we knew that okay, you can't publish a guide full of data, information to track your comic books and not update it. We knew there had to be an update, and we figured we could do one every year. If Overstreet can do one every year, well, then we can do it. Not knowing, like many things, how incredible amount of work that involved, but we thought, okay, look, we want to sell people our software one time, and then we want to get them next year and next year and next year and next year with updates, which again will make them more affordable once you're in the club. We'll sell you the update for cheap, but we've already gotten you interested. If we don't piss you off, we thought, well, maybe we can keep you from year to year, and then maybe you'll be that $1,000 bill for us too. And that's very much been our business model the whole time we've been in business. But going back to the comic stores, and I'm looking at this video of these people walking in, and I'm thinking, God, there's like maybe one, maybe one of the stores this guy visited, did they look at him like, "Oh, hey, here's a guy we would love to see every Wednesday until he retires or leaves the field," and, they're all like, "Eh." You know? Yeah, and to be fair, the guy also was not acting like he was in it to find a new comic store or to act like it was something he was a relationship he was going to be pursuing at all. He was walking in strapped with a camera on his chest, and flogging a backpack full of CGC'd comic books that he was gonna try to make a quick killing on. And, so, I mean, it was not, a business transaction in the offing that was gonna be anything like long term, although, to be fair, the guys in the comic stores didn't know, well, with the exception of the camera, yeah, what they had on their hands until, they got into the interaction a bit. And as a result, I think everyone acted very badly. So, my digressions being over, let me talk a little bit about bad comic store habits. These are the comic stores that, if you are my local comic store, you might be the closest place for me to go, but I will never go back to you again. And I hate to say it, but I've actually met one, there's a couple comic stores like this around the Nashville area where it's like, yeah, I could easily go to you. I like hanging out at comic stores, all things considered, but I won't go to yours anymore because the very first time I walked in there, I was not made to feel like I was someone you wanted to see again. Not greeting customers when they walk in the door. That absolutely crime number one. If you run a comic store and you don't have someone within sight of the door who can't say hello to every single person who walks in the door, man, you need to find a different line of work or work mail order or do something else. But man, you're not ready for retail if you can't say hi to the people who walk into your store, especially if you're busy doing something like watching TV or playing with video games or messing around the back. I mean, look, I know the hours could be long, the job can be boring, but that's your time to shine. You got to say hi to people. I mean, that's interaction number one with anyone that you're ever going to see again. Say hi, say, hey, what can I help you with? I mean, you don't need to be all over in their face and everything. If they say, hey, I'm just looking around, say, absolutely. If I help you find anything, let me know. And after they've been looking for a few minutes, say, hey, so have you seen this new thing that we've got? Or are you into this sort of thing? Try to find out their interests, try to get to know them. Because as it turns out, a comic store is loaded to the gills with cool stuff. If it's any kind of comic store at all. It's everything in the industry is meant to be able to catch your attention instantly and fill you with some kind of excitement. It's the opposite of walking into a novel-laden bookstore. It's like everything we've got is shiny. So, I mean, if you can't make that sexy to someone, you're doing it wrong. Um, uh, my biggest pet peeve, when comic stores when they abuse their comparative knowledge to the customer. So if they know more about the markets, if they know more about what's being solicited, if they know more about what's been selling, when they lie and abuse their position in order to take advantage of the customer, man, that's just, I'm sorry, but that's I'm not gonna say it's just plain evil, but it's not, you're not being a good person. It's like, when what the print run on X-Men #1 was, and, second series #1, if you know that it moves 7 million copies, and you go out there and say, "Oh, this one's really rare," you're just being a dick. Don't do it. If you know, on the other hand, that the thing that they're bringing in is incredibly valuable, if you do that thing of like, "Oh, no one's buying those ones. Those are all old," or or it's like, "Oh no, you don't want to sell that classic, Kirby Captain America. That thing's not worth anything. You gotta see the new one. The art's so much better these days. That's the one that the kids like. But I'll take it off your hand, I guess. If you're that guy, I'm sorry, but you're a low life. Don't do it. But I mean, look, it doesn't necessarily have to be the worst excesses of this one. On the other hand, I mean, there are ones where the slime factor is just so normal. We even get kind of used to it as comic collectors, but we shouldn't be as comfortable with that. If you guys remember back in the day when you had the Wizard price guide and you had the Overstreet price guide, and the Wizard price guide was infamous for being much more speculative in nature, in terms of like, oh, this is the new hotness, and they would bump everything up to a gajillion bucks, and the Overstreet price guide would not be nearly as excited about the latest chromium, gold dipped whatever thing as they were. Um, and one of the things I remember, one of the more normal comic stores that didn't normally give off the creep vibe. So I was like, well, yeah, when we buy, we always buy by Overstreet, but we always sell by Wizard. And it's like they literally would swap price guides when they're talking about the price of a given comic book. It's like, well, this is our buying price guide. And this is our selling one. And they would flip through the pages in front of me to tell me how much a particular issue of Justice League was worth. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me, man. I mean, what does that tell me as a customer? It tells me you're just looking for cheap advantage. Um, I mean, if you were out on the table and said, "Look, I mean, obviously, we run a store here. I gotta run at a price margin. This amazing splendor you see around me does not come for free, so I'm not gonna pay you as much as it costs me." I mean, I can't do that, but I'm gonna cut you a fair deal. I mean, I think everyone in their right mind understands that. But when you sit there and say, "No, I'm gonna lie about you to get a cheap advantage, and then I'm going to, the second you're out of the store, throw a fantastic price tag on it," I would only ever do that if I thought you were never gonna walk back into my store and see what that price tag was on the comic you just sold me. Because if I did, I'd be ashamed. So, don't be that guy. Um, Not being, number 3 bad habit, I'd say not being transparent about where a price comes from. So, if you've got something marked either way up or you're offering, if you're offering very little for it or you're asking very much for it, you should have a very easy story to say why that thing is the price it is. And honestly, you should not find yourself having to move the price around a lot, unless it's something that is like one of these rare comic books, which is the absolute hottest thing on the market this week because somebody just got optioned for a movie or something like that. But I mean, if we're talking about a regular comic book, Justice League, anything, I should be able to say, well, yeah, that one costs more because it's the first appearance of this guy, or it was drawn, it has Bruner art, or it has whatever else, or yeah, I know you want a lot for your comic book here, but if you'll notice this defect on the back, that puts it into good condition and not very fine condition. It's funny, I just sold as it turns out, a Bruner art Doctor Strange first series number, I want to say 172 this morning, and I looked at it and I was like, man, that seems really low for the price. And I looked at it in its Mylar and I said, this thing looks terrific. This almost looks like a very fine comic book, maybe fine at the latest. I mean, like, I had sold as good. Should I call the sale off? I'm sitting there going like, dang, man, this is a brilliant, this is a really nice copy. I mean, did I make a mistake? But then I took it out of the Mylar and I realized it was missing a chunk off the back cover. It's like, oh, that's why it's in good condition, right? And it's like you should always be very upfront about why something is in the grade it's in, why it is, priced the way it is, because that builds trust. It makes people say, okay, look, I get where that guy's coming from. One of the best comic retailers in the Bay Area, I don't know if he's still going because I think he might have closed his store after I moved out of the Bay Area. He probably just said, well, without Pete, there's no point going on. But I think I'd heard he'd closed his store. More realistically, probably due to the fact that he had Palo Alto real estate, and if he owned the land his store was on, he could just retired with a multi-million-dollar estate anywhere else if he just sold the dang land. But anyway, guy Lee Hester over at Lee's Comics, best retailer I've ever seen in the business. And Lee, if you're listening, I'm giving it up to you, man. It's I've talked to a lot of comic retailers, and I'm gonna say you are the king as far as I'm concerned. Um, Very classy guy, and never saw him misgrade a book. If he did ever get, if there was ever any doubt about the condition of things, he'd open it up, he'd be very straightforward about like, well, okay, let's explore, and more often than not, I'd have to say, okay, yeah, I get why you got where you went. And he says, yeah, look, no offense, man, it's just my standard is I never argue about the price, but we have to agree on condition. It's like, if we have any doubts about the condition, we'll work that out with you. We're going to find out how to arrive at it. But also one of the fairest graders I've ever seen. But I mean, as a result, I never had a problem with any of his prices. He was not the cheapest guy I could ever buy comic books from, but I never left there without feeling like it was a fair value for the comic book because he was always very, very straight about what was being sold. Be like Lee. um, and I'd say the last one is worst habit of a store is treating both the customer and the comic like you'll never see them again. Um, it's I'll take that. I mean, they're it's the same point, but it is two different flavors to it. So I'll take them separately. The treating the comic like you'll never see it again is, I don't know, it's a weird habit of mind, I think, that the collectible field brings with it, that the stats tend not to back up. Now, the funny thing is, in this variant saturated age of ours, there actually may be cases where the version 38 copy of Vampire versus Red Sonja, you may never see that one again because there are only 100 of them printed, and you were talking to one of, well, hopefully 100 people who cared that thing was there. But for any normal comic book that we are interested in this day, I don't care if it's Amazing Fantasy 15, I don't care if it's Action number 1, you're gonna see that comic book again. It's I mean, like, I can see being very, very chuffed if you've got one in your collection in any condition. There are people who were so desperate to see, any part of Action Comics number 1 that I think I wanna say that they spent over like $1,600 at an auction in the last year to get Action Comics' number 1, which is to say a number 1 taken from what must have been a ghastly copy of Action Comics, but someone had, taken a razor and cut out the number 1 from the cover, sold that snip of paper as its own item and got like $1,600, I wanna say, for it. That happened in our world in the last couple of years. Um, but I mean, look, realistically, not very long ago, every comic book store you knew somewhere in life had a copy of Amazing Fantasy number 15 kicking around, or an Spider-Man number 1. Now a lot of these things have been slabbed and stuck in vaults and done things like that. But the nice thing about being in a pop culture field is that everything that we care about, for the most part, was popular to some level. They're not it's not like getting the 1 copy of the Mona Lisa. It's not like getting one of, like, 3 or 4 copies of The Gates of Hell by Rodin. Um, you know, everything comes around again. You're gonna see it again. I mean, we saw even Action Comics number 1, the Rocket copy, a unique stamped copy of it, came up for auction 3 times in a year. So, yeah, I mean, don't get too excited about these things. You'll get your chance again. I mean, it took 10 years, but I eventually saw the Marvel Star Wars number 5 again, the one that I had just about humiliated myself trying to wheedle out of my neighbor to convince her to sell to me. And the funny thing is by the time I saw it again, I was like, "Eh, whatever," because 'cause I'd grown up a bit. No, but if you look at the circulations on all these things, even if you intuit that a lot of the circulations were goosed and they were really just lying to the mob and they were and any number of excuses you can do, or, "Oh, well, that's not the newsstand copy. The newsstand copy is rare." I don't care. If you look at the numbers they're alleging for, like, the newsstand copy, or the newsstand copies where they were all destroyed because people didn't treat them nicely. Man, oh man, I don't every number that's solid that I can find does not back up the story that there are not thousands, if not tens of thousands of copies of most every comic book you've ever heard of floating around somewhere. Not necessarily in the condition you want, not necessarily, in the particular shape but at the price you want, but they're around there somewhere. So take a longer view. I mean, calm your jets, I guess, is my general advice to folks on this. The and again, it's not like saying that there aren't factors making them scarcer. I'd say the number one thing that's destroying comic books is they're getting slabbed. For every comic book that gets slabbed, I always tell people, it's slabbing is not neutral. It's not, you don't just agree on a condition and then make it official by sticking it in plastic with a sticker on it. Slabbing is actually a manufacturing process of a brand new collectible whose raw material is a comic book. um, every time you slab a comic book, it becomes, for all practical purposes, its own item. So, and I think one of the bigger changes that's happened in the comic book industry in the last 20 years is you actually are exhausting the supply of even somewhat common comic books by having so very many of them slabbed, essentially taken off and turned into something else, so that when they do go up for sale, they up for sale at a weirdly inflated price. That is not commensurate with the idea that it's the same comic book, just I stuck a grade on it. But that being said, just my general advice, I mean, is cool your jets a little bit before you panic and decide to burn bridges on that goes. And secondly, the second part of the original statement of treating like I'm saying like one of the cardinal sins is treating both the customer and the comic like you'll never see them again is treat the customer like you're going to walk into the game. And like if you scam them buying their books, assume that they're going to see that book on the wall and you'll have to explain why you priced it the way you did and why you told them the things you told them while buying it. Again, I think it's fine to say, look, obviously there's overhead with what I do. Obviously, I need to make a living. I would like to make a fair return on my investment. I'd like to make you a fair deal, but I'm not going to offer you the full value you would get if you were, selling it on your own or whatever your point of reference is. I think everyone gets that. But on the other hand, if you just lie to them, if you say that, some really rare, great condition, high grade, EC comic book is like, it's a piece of garbage. It's Tales from the Crypt. Ever since the show tanked, no one's buying that stuff anymore. And you offer them $5 for it. You're gonna have to explain to them when you put up that same comic of Tales from the Crypt on your back wall for $580. You're gonna have to explain to that same customer again why it is that you told them what you did. And if the answer is that you're a damn dirty liar, well then that's on you, man. And at the very least they could do is never do business with you again and tell all their friends. Um, Anyway, but I'd say all these things, my habits of bad comic stores basically have one thing in common, is that the customers, you're not playing the long game. You're not playing the iterative version of Prisoner's Dilemma. You're playing the short. You're playing the home version, the one time where everything is a one and done, and you act like you'll never deal with the consequences. By the way, it's another reference with Prisoner's Dilemma, and because I always like these little mental problems is you guys all know the movie The Purge, right? The idea with The Purge is, as a movie concept is that, for one night, crime is legal and you can do anything you want in this thing. And as long as it's on the night of the purge, you can never be arrested for it. And so in the movies, and this is movie logic, this is not real life. People will go in and they'll rape the neighbor's daughter, they'll burn down their house, they'll shoot random people. And the theory being that everyone wakes up the next morning and says, "Hey, Bill, how's it going?" And you walk on with your day. And obviously that can never be. I mean, it's like you can never show the day after the purge because people have memories. It's like, if you burned down my storefront, if you shot my dog, if you try to rape my daughter, I don't care if it's illegal the next day. I'm gonna kill you. So it's like, it's what the law can do to you and what I can do to you are different things, my friend. And people have memories. So again, it's a lovely movie concept, but it doesn't make a lick of sense when you think about the way humans work. Same thing goes with Prisoner's Dilemma. It's like, real organized crime thing. You have the idea that like, actions will have consequences. The staple of every mob movie is the guy says, this guy did 15 years and he never gave up anyone. That's why we respect him. And that's why he's a made man. It's whereas on the other hand, the guy who got out in 3, but there's even a rumor he turned down his buddy. That guy's not going to have a good life on the streets the second he's released. Take it to the bank. But I think fundamentally, and here I'll cool my own jets a little bit and say, look, I realize there's more than one way to sell anything, including a car, a comic book, a mattress, or anything else. And I come from a certain perspective. I come from that Midwestern perspective where I run a pop culture type business where the entire fundamental ideal of something like Atomic Avenue is if we all just kind of put our cards on the table, everyone is looking for Spectacular Spider-Man number 37, can find everyone who has one for sale, and then they can find the market clearing price. That's the whole concept of that system. Because the idea is that, actually this stuff is way more common than you think it is, based through the little soda straw you've got to look through of looking at your local comic shop's inventory. That's the main problem, is that I can't necessarily find this book in the shops around me. That's a true thing. There's way too many items. But can I find it on the internet? Can I find it in a world where we can all just put our cards on the table? I mean, damn right, you can find damn near anything. Not everything, but man, it's astonishing how much stuff you can find, and you don't need to get, ruin the bank in order to do it. If there's some reason you need to find it locally, different story, right? I mean, you could drive yourself nuts driving around locally in even the California area looking for issues of Commando. On the other hand, if you walk around to any number of places in Britain, they'd have them out in bin boxes where they're all labeled for 50p each. Take as many as you want, please. So yeah, those sorts of conditions do exist, and the fact that shipping is not free, that's a real thing. But yeah, anyway, that's I come from a certain perspective, and my perspective is very much like, in general, I think you ought to be afraid of pricing too high, just as much as you ought to fear giving away the story by pricing too low. But that's my perspective. There is another perspective, and I want to give that its day, and that is the idea that, look, hey man, comics are vanishing. They're getting harder. It's comics that 20 years ago were fairly easy to find. That amazing fantasy I keep talking about. Nowadays, even low grade copies of these ones are coming up for auction, and they're drawing buzz because everything seems rarer. Now, again, I have a problem justifying why that's anything more than a perception, with the exception of the CGC conversion factor, which I think is absolutely real. But I mean, I know people are definitely biting on things in terms of collections that I wouldn't have thought would be auctionable at all. Bronze Age things are coming up for auction. There's like, you got to be kidding me. It's like mid grade Black Panthers. Like, wow, how much did that movie move? It's and the answer is it moved some, but it didn't revolutionize the universe. But I mean, I definitely get how there can be a perception of scarcity, and that can turn into a weird little self-fulfilling spiral for a while until the hype dies down, which I guess I've been in the business long enough that I tend not to be as excited by hype cycles, because no matter what everyone's going nuts about this week, wait 5 years if you can wait 5 years, and a lot of it just kind of evens out. I remember, I'm not even going to bore you with how many things I remember coming in and out of fashion. But the thing I fear the most with comic books is that you drop the customer altogether by being too much of a sharp with them. But that being said, there is a world, and I've been part of that world at one point in my life. I was a teenager, where everything is all these, people basically trading on the very latest knowledge, the very sharpest business skills, the very sharpest haggling skills, the fact that it looks like this guy needs to make rent, or this guy needs to fill up his car, whatever the thing is. And if everyone walks into it and it's all shark versus shark, I don't have a problem with that. I got a problem with shark versus little old lady. But if it's shark versus shark, I mean, the guy who in the video who walked in with a bag full of CGC 9698 copies of X-Men #5 second series, I'm gonna say, you know what? If you play in that game, you're playing with adults. You all get what you want, and I don't really care, because I don't really want to have a lot to do with any of it. It's not particularly interesting to me. But there are people who enjoy the thrill of the hunt. There are people who really like getting that last dollar out of the deal. And you know what? You can cope with each other, and you will actually even come back to that story again and again. If they feel like sharks and you're a shark, you'll do business with each other a lot. There are people who sell on eBay stores or Atomic Avenue stores who are like, man, they're fast movers. But that's very much their attitude. And again, as long as everyone's informed, I don't really care. Knock yourself out. Not my general style of doing business, but you know what? There's a place for everything in the world in terms of doing the business, as long as you're not just being completely unethical. And in that case, I think this is very much equivalent to the idea of the lesson of iterative prisoner's dilemma isn't be nice. The lesson of the iterative prisoner's dilemma is tit for tat. Do to the other guy what he did to you, right? So if he's screwing you the first time out, and you, for whatever reason, are doing business with him again, be prepared to screw right back. If he was good to you, if he was fair to you, if he was decent to you, if he offered you a break, you know what? Next time, if you want to keep on having interactions with him, do the same for him. I think the second thing tends to leave people wanting to hang out in the field more. And honestly, I think it attracts less psychotic types. But in general, just do what you need to do, but do what the other guy did and live in the world you want to live in. And on that note, I guess the final notes on things is I'll tell one final story of how this all came out. Is when I was first doing the updates for ComicBase, so ComicBase 11, I'm sorry, ComicBase 10 was going to be coming out, and we had kind of taken it, under our eye that we were going to have to put out updates on a more regular basis. We were thinking even weekly. It's just whoa, crazy weekly updates for a price guide. That's not even a thing. Not even Wizard would do monthly updates of some portion of their prices, but weekly, you got to be kidding me. But part of it was the idea of look, comics drop every week. We want to be able to cover the new stuff that came out. We want to have pictures as they come out. That's kind of a big deal. And we also wanted to, frankly, cut down on the amount. I mean, when it came to the point where like we had 40, 50,000 comics in the database, which at the time was a lot. It was bigger than any printed price guide. But I mean, if you want pain in your life, try pricing 50,000 comic books. I don't care how you do it. It's murder. When we finally teamed up with Comics Buyers Guy, we would just basically split the work. As we had a deal where we'd turn in X number of articles, throughout the year, and then they would have to take 2/3 of the pricing load and not, and not half. But even then, we're burning up the phone lines between us and the others over, Comics Buyers Guide, arguing about, well, Roy Rogers versus Dale, versus was it? Oh God, it was Roy and Dale, but forget the other cowboy, but that we were going into. It's like, who's hotter this year? And we'd have to have like an argument as to why, if we were moving the price, why we were moving the price. What did you see when you did your research about that makes you want to move this up by, however many, what percent? And, and we'd have to discuss this times thousands and thousands of books. You went out of your mind. It took months. And we wanted to make it so that we were not doing this all at once. It was murder. We knew we were going to have to, price things out weekly. Well, up to that point, I had been just a really heavy customer of the local comic shop. And right, and the local comic shop, I was living in Mountain View at the time. Death of Superman had just hit. This was, I want to say 1992 is when we were starting to think, no, I'm getting the year wrong. I know I'm getting the year wrong, but I know we were starting to think about the problem back then. But my last local comic store, at the time, the reason, well, I'll just tell the story. They decided we're gonna make some money. We're gonna kill Superman, and the normies, the people out in the regular comic press, bought it. And they said, "Yeah, okay, Superman dead, American icon. Can't believe it." And of course, all of us in the comic field knew that he'd go away for a while, he'd come back. I mean, no one really thought he'd be dead, except all the normies. So anyway, I had a standing order with the local comic guys. I dropped probably $100 a week in there, which was a lot of money back in the day. And I'd been doing this for months and months and months and months. And I said, "Hey, Superman, Death, coming up. You gonna have it on Wednesday?" "Yeah, absolutely, sure. Go pick your up your comics." I go out on Wednesday, pick up my comics, and they're like, "Yeah, I can't sell you that one, but I ordered it, and it's it should be part of my pull." It's what do you mean? "Well, it's $15 now." And this is like for like what, $253 comic book. It's like, dude, this is me. I'm a customer. I ordered this. I drop $100 in here every week. You're telling me in order to get the comic I ordered, you're going to charge me $15? Yeah. And that, needless to say, was the last time I shopped in that comic store. So I took my $100 every week, like some people take their $1,000 bill, which they represent, and I walked out that comic store. And the next thing I knew, after a bit of putzing around, is we opened up an account with Diamond Comic Distribution, and we started taking deliveries of comics every month. So which are on the behind me. I think that's a couple weeks worth, in the boxes right there. Which then become the things that we index and push out to all of y'all. Those are just the ones that came in physical format. Those aren't the ones that came out through the solicitations list and everything. But yeah, all that business walked away from the local comic store because they wanted to get an extra $12 off of a longtime customer over a single comic issue. So that's kind of stupid, guys. And that's the worst kind of short-term thinking that, again, all you're doing at that point is you've turned a long-term interaction into a one-time interaction because it's the last time I ever did business. So that's my last story on that one. And for that being said, oh, thank you. And by the way, Dale Evans, Gene Autry was the people we were looking for. Thanks. There we go. All right. So I've been talking for a long time. Thank you for listening, everyone. By the way, was gonna give a shout out to the whole thing. I'm probably not gonna go and try to review all the stuff. But anyway, but thank you very much. Um, anyway, but, guys, thank you so much. Hope this was interesting to listen to, and if so, tell your friends. Please like and subscribe these things. Really appreciate you doing this thing, and we'll hit you on the next one. I'm gonna go and drink something because my throat is gone. You guys have a great day. We'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.